Hey everybody, I am really super pumped to be giving this masterclass today. Should be really exciting here. Um, and it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart, uh, data-driven sales management and goals. So I'm gonna go. We can kind of wait a hot second here for. Oh, there she is. Hey, Nora.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, hello. I was just telling everybody that we're going to get started in a hot second here. Nora, where are you
Perfect.
joining us from exactly?
I'm calling from Sardinia. It's about 8 p.m. Just had a lovely dinner of local pasta. Really
Ooh.
living the life right now, and some local olive oil. Yeah,
So
it's been pretty
Is
nice.
Sardinia the one up here and then Capri's down here, or is it vice versa? I
No,
always
the
forget.
Corsica's up top, and that's
Corsica. That's
French, and then this is the one below it. So we're kind of in the south near Cagliari.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
wonderful. That sounds.
highly
How was
recommend it.
the pasta? I
Oh, it was
imagine it was
incredible.
probably fish. I imagine because you're on an
No,
island.
I mean we just made it here, but it's just this, refrigerated, freshly made bag, and you put it in the water, and it tastes so much better than that air dried stuff I usually get in at home. So never again, never stepping back there.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we can get this party started.
Great,
Um, Nora, I think you have a little bit of an intro for us. Ooh, here's the hallway of mirrors here. Um,
amazing.
can you see my screen okay, Nora, before
Yeah,
we get jamming?
it's looking great. All right,
Woohoo!
let's get this started. So, hello everyone. Today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of
Woohoo!
you who are not familiar with it, yeah, take a shot every time you hear Modern Sales Pros. Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our 20K and growing members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners they may not know about. We do that through
Nice.
great live sessions like what you're about to experience today, through our robust online forum, and in the near future, in person events. Those of you who aren't members, you'll be invited to join afterwards, and we sure hope you will. If you can move to the next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
If you like the content that you're about to see today, you are going to absolutely love our upcoming Revenue Excellence Summit happening October 12th through the 14th, where we'll talk people, processes, and technology needed to help you get ready for 2022.
Love
And
it.
moving on, yeah, I hope you're going to be there, Pete.
Oh yeah, I think I get to moderate a session.
Enough about MSP. Today's session wouldn't be possible without the sponsorship from the team at Atrium. So now I'm going to hand it off to founder of MSP, Pete Kazanji, who's going to also say a few words about Atrium. Pete.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nora. I'm really pumped on this topic. Setting AE and SDR goals that don't suck. That's the like spicy version of this. This is really about like managing via goals and data-driven sales management. But yeah, so Pete Kazanji here. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software that helps managers use data to improve team performance. Super easy to set up. Just log in with your Salesforce credentials, and within 5 minutes, Atrium will show you how your reps are performing across all kinds of metrics. AEs, SDRs, etc. But let's get into our content a little bit here. For folks who don't know me, I'm Pete. I'm one of the founders of Atrium, as noted earlier. Previously founded a software company called TalentVin that was a recruiting software company that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. I'm also the founder of MSP and author of Founding Sales. Founding Sales is the startup sales handbook that I wrote kind of based on my experience going from founder to initial sales rep to sales manager and leader at TalentVin. So I think a little bit about sales, just a bit, just a little bit there.
Just
Um,
a tiny smidge.
just a smidge there. So conveniently, we're gonna talk about sales stuff today. Actually, sorry, let me get you guys out of the hall of mirrors here. So content that we're gonna be covering today is all about goals. So why we do goals, an overview of that, how to do metric selection for things that we're gonna goal on, how to do data collection, how to set those goals, visualization, distribution, consumption, and then troubleshooting and resolution. So it's going to be kind of like soup to nuts on goals, not just setting them, even though that's the kind of the spicy name for the topic here. And also importantly, if you want to follow along with these slides on your own, we'll drop the link into the chat for everybody there. Folks can just go ahead and click that link, and you'll be able to get access to my gorgeous slides here that are really obviously super well designed. Can you tell that I did these? And they're really heavy on content. Maybe could use a little bit of help on the like fit and finish, but that's okay. That's how you know they're authentico, right, Nora?
Yes, indeed. Quick housekeeping though before you get into this, Pete, if I can.
Yeah, for sure.
Just a reminder for everyone, this is being recorded, so you get to rewatch this glorious session again and again and again. This will be you'll be able to access it and the key takeaways on the previous events page of our website. If you've registered for this event, you'll get an email from me afterwards, and it will tell you exactly where to go find it. Secondly, if you have a question for our resident expert, Pete Kazanji, please use the Q&A function, and we will be sure to hit that during this.
Nice.
All right, it's all yours, Pete.
The house has been kept. The housekeeping is done. The house has been kept. So let's talk about goals. So why do we do goals? Why do we set goals on, especially on leading indicators? And I think the answer to that, kind of a helpful way to think about that is as related to the world of kind of like high-end athletics, which is that like we want to win, but how do we know that we're on our way to winning? And so really the problem is that you really can't impact the score per se. Like it's very difficult to say like, hey, I want to score more points, right? Or I want to win this game. But what you can do is you can say, hey, I want to throw more strikes, or I want to take more shots, right? Or I want to have more assists, or what have you, like things that are actually closer to what we can actually do from a behavioral standpoint. And so if we focus on having like our players, if you will, execute the right quantity and quality of those actions, the score will take care of itself. And so kind of some examples of that in sports land, it would be things like, in baseball, obviously the outcomes are runs, but if you think about the inputs, it's things like hits and bases and extra base hits and home runs. And if you're a pitcher, it's strikes versus balls and strikeouts and walks and steals and pickoffs and things like that. And these are the kind of the inputs. And then when you think about measuring quality, it's things like, efficiency and quality. It's things like batting average or slugging percentage, or, and then we can get like super advanced, like wins against replacement and all sorts of like other kind of crazy things there. And so the cool thing about this is that if you set goals on these things and you measure these leading indicators, well, you can kind of see what's coming down the pike, right? You kind of see the future, not like, not like guaranteed, but you can see what the future is going to look like, and then also you can intervene to change it, which is all the more important because that's coaching, right? That's management. And so what as relates to this, not only do we want to get granular and leading indicator, we also want to kind of focus on the things that are human centric, right? Like it's not sufficient for us to say like, hey, you know what, we like as a team, we want to hit more balls, or as a team, as an aggregate SDR team, we want to create more opportunities, right? Instead, what we have to do is we have to get down to the individual level, because that's actually where that performance happens, and more importantly, where we can intervene and say, oh, you know what, this SDR is having this batter is having this problem, this SDR is having this problem, this A is having this problem, and then we can solve it, we can fix that accordingly. And so the way that we do this, we like to call it data-driven sales management, but there's a series of steps, and we're going to kind of go through them here in this master class. Importantly, like this is kind of my rendition of this. if folks, and this is kind of like the nickel tour, if folks want to get like really juiced on this and like dive super deep, there's an amazing book out there by a gentleman named Jason Jordan called Cracking the Sales Management Code, that kind of gets like, it gets like 200 pages deep on this as opposed to like 40 slides deep on it. And I think what we're going to do is share share in the chat. If folks want to sign up to get a copy of that book, you can do that, but it's absolutely amazing. But kind of in short, to do data-driven sales management, like one, you got to think about the metrics you're going to select, right? You got to collect the data such that we can actually we can make judgments about things. You can ask questions. Then we got to actually set goals, right? We can't just have metrics and then say like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you can do whatever level that you want. And then next, what we have to do is we have to do visualization of those metrics. The step after that is then we have to distribute those visualizations, right, to make sure that they actually get in front of people, right, in our meetings, in our email, in our meetings, in our in our Slack or what have you. And then lastly, we actually have to reason against them, troubleshoot and resolve things. Like, we actually have to manage with those goals. Excuse me, with those metrics. And so this is like the way to kind of think about it is kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the things that are further up are reliant on the things that are further down the stack. Like, you can't just say like, hey, I want to diagnose a bunch of things and analyze what's going on with my team. Well, actually, you got to have this like whole stack in place in order to do that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of like jump up the stack over the next bit here. So first, let's talk about metric selection. So a couple of principles for us to talk about here. First, you got to think about like the teams that you're going to be instrumenting, right? Because different roles need different metrics. So if you're talking about like different metrics, but also different time periods. So like if we're talking about an SMB AE team, well, maybe we're going to be measuring bookings on a monthly basis. If it's a mid-market team, maybe we're going to be measuring bookings on a quarter. If it's, if we're doing new opportunities that are created by inbound SDRs, maybe because it's higher volume, we probably might be looking at that on a per week basis. Whereas maybe if it's an outbound SDR motion, that might be something more like, opportunities created in the month. The next thing we want to do is we want to think about like, hey, what are our reps spending, what are the roles spending their time doing? Are they doing are they very dial heavy? Are they supposed to be having meetings? Are they sending emails? Like, this is going to tell you what it is that you should measure. Next, what I would say is that folks should always just start basic. Oftentimes what can happen is we can kind of get like lost in the sauce, especially as we go through some of this content. There's going to be a lot of stuff, but like, don't get overwhelmed and be like, oh man, this is too hard. I can't do this. Just start, right? Just start measuring a smaller set of metrics. And then what you can do is you can extend over time, because this is really just like an iterative process. And then lastly, don't overthink it. There are really good existing conventions out there. Oftentimes people are like, well, my sales motion is like special. It's usually not. Like, if you have SDRs, they create opportunities. Oh, well, maybe maybe they don't create opportunities. Maybe they flip leads to a certain place and then reps create the opportunities. Okay, but like, there's this shared outcome, right? Your AEs, they all have a win rate. They all have an average selling price. They all are having customer-facing meetings with people. So don't overthink it. And usually, what like the kind of well-worn conventions are things that are going to be good for you.
Hey,
you
Pete,
can kind of,
question about that.
Madam.
How many metrics are too many metrics, would you say? Like, if someone's going to just start from scratch, is it like one metric are they looking at? They're picking their top 3 motions?
Yeah, I think what I would say there is probably what you want to do. Like, if you're starting from 0, it's probably like a half dozen, and you want to have a mix of like inputs and outputs there. If you're more advanced, it can be more than that. But like, yeah, if you're starting from kind of scratch, I think it's kind of like start basic with like a half dozen or so. That would kind of be my approach there. And conveniently, these are kind of like a list of metrics that you put, like suggested metrics to potentially choose from there. Also, an important thing to kind of think about is that these metrics are connected, right? So like, there's actually a driver tree where like bookings come from wins, average sale price, average deal cycle. Where do wins come from? They come from win rate versus attempts. The same is true on the SDR side. And then, so this is kind of related. This is why you don't only want to track outputs. You want to track the inputs to those and the inputs to those as well. So that's kind of metric selection. So next, let's talk about data collection here, because what we need to be able to do is collect the data in order to like answer these questions as related to the metrics that we selected above. The good news is, you can automate a lot of that data collection. This is something that it's kind of like a push me, pull me situation with sales operations and sales, and kind of like sales management. It's like, hey, like more and more and more data collection or a manual data collection kind of slows things down, makes it hard for reps, et cetera. The good news is you can automate a lot of this. Your sales engagement platform will usually do a pretty good job of like logging email, logging meetings to the CRM. There are specific, performance analysis tools like Atrium that'll automate the collection as well. And then when you're thinking about like manual data capture, just the important thing to think about there is like, can you streamline things, right? Like maybe to use the example earlier about, opportunity creation with SDRs. Could you maybe just have the SDRs create the opportunities as opposed to having like a special subtask that is tied to the account object that you're counting? Like, would it be just maybe simpler to like think about how can I answer these questions that I want to answer, but in the kind of like the like lowest friction overhead possible, because that's going to make it such that you can do a better job of capturing data without kind of like driving your team insane. So cool. So now let's talk about goal setting a little bit here. Some kind of principles here, a couple of principles here. Like one, what you want to do is when we're setting these goals, like again, it's not sufficient just to say, hey, you know what, we're going to have these metrics and, yay. It's like, oh, we have these metrics. What are the appropriate levels for these metrics, whether it's a quantity metric or a quality metric? And so first, like what we want to do is when we're setting our goals, they should be reasonable and attainable, and they should be data informed. And so then the question is like, okay, well, how do you make sure that they're data informed? And there's kind of like three different ways that you can do that. One, you can look at historical performance of those teams. So you can look at like maybe your average or maybe a little bit above the average in order to say like, hey, this is the goal. This is like where we would like to set our goal for our team. Then like if you set your goal on your top performers, it's probably not going to be like super attainable, and it's probably going to grump people out. The other thing too is you can do bottoms up goaling, where what you can do is you can use a model to say, hey, how much activity does this, or how much time does a given activity take? Like maybe what you're talking about is like SDRs, where they're sending emails or they're making calls, or you're talking about AEs where they're having or CSMs, and they're having customer facing meetings. How much time does that take? Is it a 30-minute meeting? Is it a 45-minute meeting? How much time is there in the interval in question? And like, in a week, and you can kind of do like a bottoms up there and say, oh, okay, it's like reasonable to have 4 meetings a week, given this amount of prep that is needed, or 4 meetings a day, pardon me, 4 meetings a week. What? And so that's how you can kind of do bottoms up. And then the last thing you can do is you can do benchmarks. And so benchmarks are pretty cool because you can like look at how other organizations that are like your organization have done things previously. And then what you can kind of do is like you can take all 3 of those and like kind of like blend them together and kind of like mix it around, and then and get to kind of like oh, okay, cool, this feels like the right goal here. But then importantly, you don't just say like, hey, you know what, that's the goal, like, line in the sand, that's it. Importantly, we're going to want to be able to iterate there, because oftentimes these things are incorrect, and what you want to be able to do is then like iterate appropriately, and not just be like, hey, I came up with this thing, this must be right? Like these are all hypotheses until proven otherwise there.
So Pete, question again.
Madam.
Question again on that. So for the iteration, how often do you suggest stepping in to take a look at those goals and seeing when you should be revamping them?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll get to this in the kind of the consumption and distribution section, but but I think the reality is that like you should be looking at these constantly, right? Like on a weekly and a monthly basis. And if it turns out that like, wow, nobody's making this goal on a recurring basis, that feels like maybe the goals might be wrong there, right? And so I think that like the auditing of goals is something that you'll kind of like continually you'll just do as a matter of course in your consumption, kind of in your consumption cadence there. So these are some examples of like potential goals that I might levels, excuse me, with a kind of metric. Again, you can grab this deck if you guys want to reference this. I think we dropped the URL in the chat there, but if you want to reference these kind of like guidelines here, AE meetings, 7 to 15 a week, kind of depending on the cadence there. Total opportunities that somebody might be managing at any given point in time, it's going to be like 20 to 80, obviously like super wide variation there depending on the velocity of the sales cycle. And of course, same with bookings, right? Like it could be a velocity sales motion with, selling to SMBs. We're talking about like $30,000 of bookings a month, or it could be like $500,000, like crazy enterprise sales rep, like $500,000 per quarter. So this is obviously highly motion dependent. But these ones that are like leading indicators, these are like, they're kind of more banded, right? Because we all have like 40 or 50 hours in the week. And so even if you're a crazy enterprise rep that has, a $2 million quota, well, the reality is like, you still got 40 hours in the week. And, we should be using that time to have meetings with people, because that's what we do as sales reps. And the same is kind of true over here on the SDR side the same is true on the SDR side as well. Cool. So that's goals. That's setting the goals. But then, to Nora's question, well, how do we know how we're doing against the goals? Well, we visualize them and we look at them. And so we're going to kind of talk about some of the principles here on visualizations here. Kind of the primary mechanism by which we visualize data is with these sort of data is with reporting. So if you collect data and you never look at it, like you're kind of like eating all the pain without any of the value. And so like you got to have visualization. Again, remember Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like we got to have our visualization before we can do any of our analysis. And so the way to kind of think about this is like, first, what are these reports and dashboards for? A really helpful thing there is to think about each report answers a question, right? Answers a discrete question. As an example, how many ops have the SDRs created this month so far? How many ops does each AE own right now this second? How much pipeline is closing in the coming 90 days by rep? That's a forecasting question. How many emails did each SDR send last week? That's an activity question. But you can see like each of these is a question. And then a way to think about it is like a dashboard is a combination of these reports that should be used at a certain point in time. I call it a consumption point. And this is one of the things that people kind of mess up is they create these like kitchen sink dashboards. We call it like a wall of charts. And they're not helpful because they're just like this massive wall of charts. Like, oh man, where's the thing that I'm looking for? It just all like my eyes glazed over. And instead what we want to do is we want to say, hey, this dashboard is used in an AE one-on-one to review performance during this time period. That would be at a consumption point in time. This dashboard, a different dashboard, is used at noon every day to see how the SDRs are doing on their daily performance metrics. That would be a very, very, very different dashboard than that AE one-on-one dashboard. And it would be composed of very, very different questions there. And then the next thing that to kind of think about from a principle standpoint is that often you're going to want multiple views per metric. So usually one view is like not enough. To use the example earlier, how many ops have the SDRs created so far this month? Well, that just tells us about this month, but that doesn't actually give us any trending information, for instance. So we might want to pair these two together to have how many have they created this month, and then maybe what it might be is like, and how has that trended over the last, 6 months, grouped by month, right? And so like pairing together a total with a trend can be very helpful there. Some different ways that organizations approach this are kind of like the basic like kind of the 1.0 version of this is organizations using CRM reporting, right, in their CRM, whether it's Salesforce or kind of other stuff. This is good because it's like just available already. The downsides associated with it is like it requires you to build everything. Most of the reports need to be built by scratch, and then kind of data collection can oftentimes be a challenge. Business intelligence like Looker or Tableau can be another way that organizations do this. Usually it's more sophisticated organizations. The kind of the benefits of it, it's extremely powerful. The downside associated with it is like usually it's like a pretty heavy lift to set up if you don't have it in place. It usually takes a couple months to get dialed in there with like data engineering help. And then moreover, it's not really that super user friendly, but it is powerful, right? So if you have a BI analyst who can do things for you, that can be really great if you can get their attention. And then there's like dedicated stuff. We call this category data-driven sales management software. Atrium was one example of that. Kind of the benefits of it is like it works straight out of the box, which is pretty compelling if you don't have much in place. And also can automate the consumption and like kind of analysis of these things, and kind of push that information to managers, kind of like less analytical, kind of less technical managers who just need to like metrics to do their job. In terms of like an advertisement for Atrium, if folks are interested in doing better at data-driven sales management and using data to improve their AE and SDR management performance and team performance and enable their managers, that's literally what we do, right? It takes 2 minutes to set Atrium up. The reporting is already pre-baked. We hook directly into those various systems that people use to do their job. And then importantly, the data is continuously monitored on behalf of the managers and kind of information is pushed to them. I think we're going to drop a little self-guided tour into the chat there. So if folks want to check that out and kind of like click around and goof off there.
Yeah, that was seamless, Pete. Seamless integration.
Woo! Yeah. So let's look at some examples of these. Like this is, again, got a total, got a trend here. This would be customer facing meetings by rep this month, total. Like how are we doing? Answering a very straightforward question. Are we busy? Are we having lots of customer facing meetings? And then moreover, on this other guy over here, we can kind of see trends here. So you can very quickly, you can kind of see this rep right here, like pop, 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 and then pop up right again. And so this is why having a total versus a trend can be very helpful there, right? Same with kind of like opportunity ownership. Questions here that would be being answered is like, hey, is there any rep that appears to be lagging on ops right now? Well, this one right here, I can see he or she looks low compared to other folks, right? Is there any rep that appears to be outperforming in a way that we can replicate across the team? Yeah, I mean, there seem to be 3 that are up here. What are they doing? What are they doing that these guys down here are not? Kind of the questions that are being asked over here and answered would be things like, hey, are we seeing trends in opportunity volumes that we might want to address? Like, oh, hey, whoa, what's going on here, Turbo? Why are you down here, right? Are we seeing impact across the team of any initiatives? Like, hey, we did all that, we're spending all that money on Google AdWords. Are we seeing a rise in opportunity inflow? We hired a bunch of new SDRs. Are we seeing a rise in that opportunity creation? Pipe hygiene would be another example here as well. So like maybe you're looking at things like untouched opportunities. These are great for like clean your room dashboards. Hey, how many untouched opportunities that haven't been how many opportunities that haven't been touched in 30 days that each of our reps have right now? Well, these guys are doing a good job and these guys are in the doghouse, right? How are we doing over time with our pipe hygiene, right? Not so great, not so great. Whoa. Someone got serious about pipe hygiene here. Wonk, right? And then also like ramping as well. So ramping is an extraordinarily important point in time during the AE hiring process or during the AE life cycle. And so what you would want to understand is like, hey, how are we doing? Is an AE ramping into band, right? This is a visualization where we've got everybody's start dates kind of normalized over here, and we kind of see everybody burning up here, and you can kind of see like, oh, this guy's kind of trailing off. Uh-oh, what's going on there, right? Paying attention to leading indicators in ramp is like even more like paying attention to leading indicators is important. Paying attention to leading indicators in ramp is the most important because you don't have any other data, right? You haven't gotten the outputs yet, whether it's in SDRs, it's opportunity creation, or in AEs, it's bookings or win rate or what have you there. This is kind of an example. This eye chart right here is an example of kind of like composing a lot of these things together. Like this is a last week results, month in progress, AE dash. Has like bookings right here. So bookings for the previous week, bookings so far this month, wins in the prior week, wins for the entire month, etc. And so you can kind of see that these are paired together. And what you would do is you would look at this in a specific consumption point, a Monday team meeting, and you say, hey, how are the outputs in the prior week? How are we pacing towards goals for this month? And this would be an example of a dashboard that would be consumed at a specific point in time that is composed of a variety of questions to answer there. This is a template for kind of like if you want to plan out a dashboard, thinking about what that looks like. So what's the metric? What's the time period? What's the grouping in question? And then also you can visualize these things in a tabular fashion. Actually, this is the template right here. Cool. So that is visualizations, how to go about some visualizations. Let's now move on to consumption. One of the jokes I like to say is, if a tree falls in the woods and there's nobody around, does it actually make any noise? Right? That's kind of like the old kind of joke. And similarly, like if we have an SDR activity dashboard and nobody's paying attention to it, or an AE team dashboard and no one's paying attention to it, does anybody actually do any selling? And so this is why like distribution and consumption is extremely important, because that's literally how we pay. Thanks, Nora. That's literally how we understand how these that's how we do data-driven management. And so let's talk about a couple different ways to do distribution. Importantly, like if they're kind of like hidden in a folder and they're not like in front of people, it's a bad scene. And so you just want to like have these things everywhere. You want to have URLs are your friend, which is great. Like most reporting solutions, that like there's a discrete URL or hyperlink for a dashboard or for a report or what have you. These are your friends, and so you can bookmark them. In fact, actually, you can kind of see right here. I have like a bajillion like Atrium dashboards right here. And same here. Like I'm kind of, I drink my own champagne in this regard, and so bookmarking things, putting those URLs in calendar events. Like, hey, this is the point in time at which we consume the SDR last week outputs, month in progress dashboard. Okay, well, like let's put it in the meeting invite, in that meeting, or like in the meeting invite. Moreover, so that's like making it really easy for us to go and access stuff. The next thing you'd want to do is help. The phrase that we use at Atrium is meet managers where they are, like bring it to them. And so what that usually means is things like broadcasting reports and dashboards via email, whether it's to the individual manager or to like a team listserv. This is kind of like the digital equivalent of having dashboards up on screens in a Salesforce, especially now that a lot of organizations are working from home or distributed. Like those big monitors on the wall, dirty secret is no one was ever looking at them. Now no one's even in the office to look at them. So, but you can do the digital equivalent thereof is you can broadcast them. You can broadcast them via email, you can broadcast them via Slack, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of already gave my opinion on TVs. Especially nowadays, it's not super useful. And then also you can just like embed these things in decks. So oftentimes a meeting, whether it's like an executive meeting or a QBR or what have you, you'll have like some sort of deck template that then you'll put like screenshots in. This can oftentimes be the bane of some poor sales operations analysts existence. Oftentimes like just doing it in a dashboard can be faster. But if you're gonna do something like this, a really great way of doing it is to have like in the template, you have a screenshot, but then you have a hyperlink back to our point about URLs, you have a hyperlink in the speaker notes, if you will, such that like the next time you go to do that, the next time you go to fill that deck out, like next week or next month or whatever, the hyperlink's right there. And you just be like, dink, dink, screenshot back in there, boom, on your merry way. Cool. So then in terms of consumption, it's one thing to distribute things, so you actually have to make sure these things are being consumed. And so when people get busy, like the metrics consumption can really be like one of the first things that kind of gets kicked down the road. And so having a mechanism by which to enforce consumption for yourself can be really good. So noted earlier, if you have a meeting where it's important to look at metrics, just having those hyperlinks to those dashboards or those reports can be very powerful. Oftentimes meetings will have an agenda. We do this quite a bit. We have our sales team, we have like a customer success team agenda, or like team meeting agenda. Same thing with the sales team. And then we actually have a template at the top that has like how the meeting is run, and has hyperlinks to all the supporting reports and dashboards. And so when you're doing preparation there, it can be really powerful. So I have a 30-minute preparation block on my calendar. We have our operating rhythm, which we'll get into a little bit more. We have a team meeting on Mondays for our AEs and SDRs. I have half an hour scheduled at the beginning of my day to go through a bunch of those supporting assets in order to understand if there's topics that need to be discussed. Like, oh man, we're light, like so-and-so isn't getting round robin appropriately. Like we need to change something there. And then the other thing that you can do is you can have what I call non-meeting recurring calendar events. I know it's kind of a mouthful, which is just a reminder on your calendar, like, hey, now is the time to go and look at that SDR dashboard. Now is the time to go and look at this really important AE dashboard or what have you. Because one of the phrases we kind of joke about in our sales team here at Atrium is calendar is destiny. And so if it's on the calendar and it's blocked there and there's a hyperlink, it's probably much more higher likelihood that you're going to be able to get to that and look at that. And so this is kind of what some of this looks like in practice. Yeah, here's all your agenda items and meeting rooms. Oh, here's the thing I was pointing out earlier, like bookmarks are your friend. And then here's an agenda doc there. These are all hyperlinks to supporting reports. And then of course you can broadcast things. But really what you want to do is you want to surround your managers with data, because it's hard as a manager, like you're surrounded by alligators. And so if you're surrounding people with data, it's very hard to miss things, right? Like maybe you miss a dashboard one week, but you catch it the next week because it showed up in Slack, right? Because you had it on your calendar and it showed up in Slack at the same time. And so this is an example of like an operating rhythm that we use in our organization. So we have daily stand-ups that have certain supporting metrics. We have a sales team meeting on Monday. We've got a team pipeline review on Wednesdays. And so all of these various meetings, these operating rhythm meetings, have supporting materials within that. Again, you can check this out when you guys grab the slides. It's like an example of what this looks like in practice. So let's talk a little bit about what happens, as we just talked about consumption. What happens when things get weird, when things change? Like, there's a pandemic and all of a sudden like your business changes, or maybe something changes in the market, there's a new competitor, or fill in the blank. And so the important thing there is when you have your kind of you have to realize that if something substantially changed in the market, you're probably going to have new baselines there. Hopefully this won't happen anytime soon for folks that are listening right now, because it can be disruptive. This is kind of like Nora's question about how do you reevaluate things? Well, if there's some sort of exogenous shock, it's important to reevaluate things. So first you're going to figure out your new baselines. You need to figure out what is the, oh gosh, to use a terrible phrase, what is the new normal of but for those metrics, and then set new goals and quotas associated with it, and then importantly enforce those new baselines, right? And so the first question would be okay, well, how do you figure out those new baselines? Probably what you would do is you would from a basic standpoint, you would start with the most important KPIs to kind of re-benchmark for the AEs. That would be the revenue formulas, like bookings, new ops, win rate, ASP, deal cycle. For SDRs, it's the same thing, which is pipeline formula: ops created, new accounts, new accounts engaged, new contacts engaged, ops created per account engaged, which is essentially just win rate, op creation win rate, if you will. And then what are the new realities? So you're going to want to take a sampling period to make sure that you are capturing the new reality. Unfortunately, this can be kind of like different depending on the KPI and the sales motion, what have you. For AEs, usually like you won't have a good view into what's going on for at least like one sales cycle or maybe more. For a longer sales cycle, it's like really tough, which is why precursor instrumentation becomes all the more important. And so just kind of some examples of what this might look like. These are some screenshots from back in the, gosh, I guess it's like more than a year ago at this point, February, March of 2020. And you can kind of see this is like a pretty substantial drop in customer-facing meeting volume for this this mid-market AE team, right? Because their prospects weren't taking meetings, like they were trying, right? But the prospects weren't taking meetings at the time. And the same is true. Like this is an email engagement rate metric. This is how responsive prospects are. This is like an SDR metric. It can be an AE metric too, but it's like very, very SDR metric-y. And you can see that like all of a sudden, if email responsiveness drops by like, what was it, like half, probably, our op creation rate is going to per account engaged is probably going to suffer as well. So just kind of like making sure that you understand how big the drop off is, because that's going to impact the lagging indicators as well there. And so this is a worksheet that you can kind of use to do that for the AEs, and this is the equivalent for the SDR. It's just based on these revenue formulas. So the AE revenue formula and then the pipeline formula here. Cool. And then moreover, if you want to figure out kind of like what those new goals should be, this is an opportunity for you to like get on top of this. The way to think about what the appropriate sampling period might be is the number of reps that you have, because like they're going to be the ones giving you data, crossed with your sales motion velocity. So like the faster your sales motion is, like SDR, SDR motion being pretty quick, SMB AE motion being pretty quick, or like enterprise AE being pretty slow, crossed with whether it's a precursor or an output metric. So for instance, if you've got like 100 SDRs on your team, or like 50 SDRs on your team, and they're kind of like, it's an inbound SDR motion where they're like, I don't know, making a handful of ops per week or what have you, and it's a leading indicator like calls. Well, you're probably going to be able to see, or like connect rate, for instance, you're probably going to be able to see like that new reality very quickly, because you have a bunch of people. It's a fast sample size or sample cycle, and it's a precursor metric. Whereas conversely, if you have like 5 enterprise AEs and you're trying to see what the new reality is for bookings, well, it's going to take a while to kind of get on that, which is why leading indicators become all the more important in that regard. Just kind of some more examples of this. Yeah, email engagement rate, opportunity creation here, kind of a dip there. And this is just kind of examples of how you can see like really big kind of like, right, changes there. Also, I think what you want to make sure is that something is actually an average. So like when you're looking at a team average, in order to say, hey, what's changed, make sure that you're not like, you're not only including things that are kind of like substantially deteriorated. Like if there's somebody who seems like they're kind of keeping their tempo up, or a handful of folks that are keeping their tempo up, this is why data-driven management is so important, because like they may have a secret that we should probably figure out and then broadcast to the rest of the team there. And then lastly, what you're going to do is you're going to you set new goals on that and cascade that to the rest of your organization. And then, importantly, probably update your operating model, whether it's the AE version or the SDR version right there. Cool. So last section, kind of like top of the pyramid here, is like troubleshooting and resolution, because the reason why we do this stuff is not just for funsies. We do this so we can change rep behavior, right? We want to troubleshoot what's wrong with a given rep or a team or what have you, and then change behavior, or like implement programs in order to fix things. And that's either fixing something that's wrong, or taking something that's rad and then broadcasting it and systematizing it to everybody there. And so now we're going to talk about like how to do that. So a couple of principles on troubleshooting and resolution. So first, we got to detect. We got to detect that something's off. right? So like with our visualizations, what we want to do is we want to use our eyeballs, or alternatively, if you have special data-driven sales management software that kind of detects anomalies and lets you know, like first, now we know something's up, right? Whether it's like a rep that has a way higher win rate, or it's a rep whose individual meeting volume has deteriorated over time. We want to detect that. So then what we want to do is we want to diagnose. So once we've detected that, we want to say like, okay, like what's the root cause there? Why is this rep's customer-facing meeting volume declining over time? Or and what you want to do there is kind of like go upstream. So like in the case of customer-facing meeting volume declining over time, it might be like, oh, is this rep getting enough new stuff coming onto his or her plate? What's the new op inflow look like? Or like, like, did they fall off the round robin? Or do they have a prospecting requirement? If they do, are they doing that? Because that's kind of upstream, right? So we want to diagnose and kind of figure out, and that's where that metrics tree that we looked at earlier, kind of at the top of the deck, is helpful, because what you can do is you can kind of go upstream and kind of like look into like where this might be coming from. So then once that issue has been identified and diagnosed, well, we need to make sure that we discuss it, right? And usually the way that I like, this is where kind of data-driven management, like the human aspect of data-driven management comes in. I like to have this in a conversation with the rep where you can kind of bring it to them and say, hey, I'm observing this thing. Here's this data. Do you have a point of view on this, right? Do you have an idea of where this might be coming from there? Rather than showing up and being like, oh no, right? It's better to approach from a position of like learning and like, hey, I'm observing this thing. Let's debug it together, and kind of co-create the potential like root cause or co-diagnose the root cause, and then co-create what we think is like the potential resolution for that. And then once we figure out what the potential resolution is there, we have to commit to that we're going to do that. Hey, you're going to prospect more, right? Or you're going to, oh, I notice your ASP is low. Why do we think that's the case? Oh, I haven't been attaching professional services. Oh, okay, wonderful. Well, we're going to commit then on our next 5 closing calls, we're going to make sure that we are talking about professional services. Do we agree on that? Yes, we agree. Okay, wonderful. I want you to send me the calls afterwards to hold both of us accountable. You're going to send me the calls, like in your pre-call planning, you're going to set an intention to talk about to position professional services, and then you're going to send me the calls after the fact to verify that that you talked about professional services. Okay, yes, we're agreed on that, and then we're going to loop back on an ongoing basis and see if that helped remediate that ASP that was potentially lower, right? So that's essentially that coaching loop. So we detect, diagnose, we say, hey, what's the resolution to that? Okay, here's the prescription associated with that, and then we're gonna loop back on that to make sure that it's actually happening. And if it's not happening, right, we're gonna figure out why it's not happening. Or maybe if the prescription is being done, but it doesn't actually have the impact on the outcome, well, that would indicate that like maybe our hypothesis was wrong. But that's okay, right? Because like what we're doing is we're working on that big problem, the number one biggest problem for that rep, which might be ASP for this rep, it might be prospecting for this rep, it might be pipe hygiene for this rep over here. And usually, unfortunately, this is why sales managers get paid the big bucks, right? Because usually it's going to be a different problem for different reps. And so if you can solve that problem, it's powerful because it's way higher leverage than trying to help them with this deal or that deal or what have you, because what you're doing is you're improving their behavior, right? So what's going to happen is their behavior is going to positively impact all of their deals, as opposed to like this deal right here that you were being a hero on. So those are some kind of principles there. Again, what you want to do is you want to look for like shifts here. So like, what the heck's going on with, what's the name of this rep? Brer Rabbit. What the heck is going on here with Brer Rabbit, right? That's a weird shift, right? That's a warning shift. What the heck is going on here with Winnie the Pooh? Why is he or she able to crush it from a customer-facing meeting volume? And then we would dig into that in order to diagnose what's going on. And then importantly, like when we're going to like resolve these problems, you actually, in addition to like when you're focusing on a specific problem, with a given rep, like, hey, you've got a pipe hygiene problem, right? And we need your activity to get up. We diagnosed this by kind of observing what was going on in our dashboards or reports. Then we added the tile. Maybe we added tiles. This is one of the things I like to do. I have one-on-one kind of coaching dashboards for all my reps. It only has like 2 or 3 tiles on it for each of my 8 AEs, and it's the things that we're working on. So it's kind of like golf. I used to be okay at golf. I don't really golf anymore, but like I like it as a metaphor. Or when you're coaching somebody's golf swing, you don't coach them on like 10 things at a time. It's just one thing, right? Or 2 things, like, hey, keep your head down, or keep your arm straight, or like release your leg. I don't even know if these are like good golf coaching examples, but you focus on one thing. Go ahead, Nora.
I was going to say, do not take golf tips from Peak, Sanji. If I can just add a little addendum here, this is not the expertise area.
Don't take golf tips, but take golf metaphors.
There we go. Yes, perfect.
Yeah, take golf metaphors are okay. Golf tips don't. But the point is that like you want to focus in on like 1 or 2 things, and the way that you can do that is the way that I do that is with various coaching dashboards that only have like 2 or 3 tiles on it. So I might have a rep that has a pipeline hygiene problem, and so what we would have there is go back to our visualization tenets. We would have how many untouched opportunities does he have right now as compared to everybody else, and then moreover it might be a trend. Remember, a total with a trend. So then we would have a trend over time to say, hey, are we getting better or are we getting worse? Because you better be getting better because we're working on this together, right? And then lastly, what you can do is you can kind of set goals on these. You can say, hey, look, which goes to our kind of the obnoxious name of this session, right? We can set specific goals to help fix the problem in question. Like, oh man, you have a pipe hygiene problem. Let's go ahead, like that we identified. Let's diagnose that. Great. Now let's put that in, like put some tiles in our coaching dashboard, and then let's set a goal on our untouched ops and say, hey, you used to have 50 untouched ops. Yikes. Let's get that under 15, okay? To start. And then what we can do is we can come back to that, right? And so now we have that in place. And moreover, you can get prescriptive and say, hey, you know what? Let's put an hour on your calendar, 4 p.m. on a Monday, and maybe like 2 through 4 p.m. on a Friday, when like prospects want to be taking calls, kind of like not really good calling times, and that's going to be your dedicated pipe management session there. And then as a result, now we've got a coaching plan that should create an environment for that rep to get better at pipe hygiene, right? And that's just for that rep right there. So this is how we chose both troubleshoot and then also resolve, right? Because it's if we just troubleshoot and then say like, hey, you got a pipe hygiene problem, figure it out. You're a crappy manager. Like, that's not how to do data-driven sales management. That's not even how to do that's not even how to do management, right? Like what you're there to do is to coach and say like, hey, I'm seeing this problem. Let's figure out a potential solution to this. I'm going to make some suggestions associated with this, and now I'm going to enforce that. Actually, another book recommendation for folks that I just absolutely love is Corey Bray's 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach. Absolutely fantastic for managers, like SDR managers, AE managers of all stripes, whether you're a new manager or a tenured manager or whatever. It's absolutely fantastic. That kind of talks about like this coaching process and how it's like it's an iterative process. I think actually maybe what we can do is drop a link in the chat there to we actually have we have a bunch of those on hand, and if folks want to grab a copy of that, they can just sign up for that, and we'll send it out to folks there. So that's resolution there. So the big thing there, of course, is troubleshooting a resolution. We gotta detect those anomalies, right? We gotta detect those anomalies and make sure that they're like that we like are aware of those, and then we can start acting towards fixing there. And again, if you go ahead and download the slides, you'll be able to get access to these driver trees here on where, like, how to root cause things. Like, oh, I see that there is a win rate problem. Where could that be coming from? Oh, it could be coming from a pipe hygiene problem, untouched ops. It could be coming from an opportunity conversion rate problem, etc. Cool. So I think we made it, Nora. We made
Yeah,
it.
great job. It was perfect.
We
It was awesome.
barely made it. Do we have any, because I know we have 5 minutes left, do we have any Q&A that we wanted
Yeah, we do.
to get into? Because I've been like jamming so hard here, I haven't looked at Q&A at all.
Yeah, we've got a couple in here. Let me dive into this. So one question that I thought was kind of interesting, we got it from Austin, is talking about as you're restructuring or revamping your SDR and AE processes and metrics, how do you get the buy-in from your team, from your reps? How do you convince them that this is the best way to do it, especially when they're used to doing it their way and they're hesitant to change?
Yeah. So the question is like, is essentially around change management around implementing with reps. Well, I think that the answer to that is a couple fold. One is like if your goals and your metrics are data based and well informed, you can show up and say, hey, here are the things that our top performers do. You can see it right here, right? And as a result, based on the fact that I know that this is not, we're not going to set the goals here where the top performers are, but we're going to set them here. And by doing so, that's going to help you have more success, make more, if you're an AE, if you're an AE or an SDR, make more money through either enhanced bookings or enhanced opportunity creation or what have you. So that's the first thing, is like, hey, these are rational, and here's why. And then the next thing would be to kind of like ease into it, to start with a certain set of metrics. Right? Don't kind of go like, all right, cool, like coming off the top rope and we're going to do a bajillion things. Kind of goes back to some of the stuff we talked about at the very beginning of the presentation on kind of like principles on metric selection. Just like, hey, start with like some basic ones. Like if it's an SDR team and you haven't been measuring things very much, like maybe it's total activity, email count, call count, and maybe unique accounts engaged, and maybe net new accounts engaged. It's usually pretty good, right? And then like we can it's kind of like going into jacuzzi. You don't just cannonball in the jacuzzi. You put your foot in, you go up to the ankle, and you're like, all right, cool, we're good. And then you go, then like maybe next what you go do is you go up to your knee. So like those are some of the ways to make it such that it's easier for reps to kind of acclimatize to this. But I think situating it and making it kind of clear that like this is for them to make them more successful, as indicated by kind of the historical data, is a really great way of doing that.
Especially, I think, as you were saying, when you're doing the coaching and you're bringing it up in every successful or successive one-on-one, showing how much they can improve by it, it's probably a pretty solid convincer in himself.
Yes.
Well, that's kind of all we have time for our Q&A. This was absolutely fantastic to have you on, Pete. First, we want to thank everyone else for attending. We have loved having you here. Thank you also to our wonderful sponsor, Atrium. They're doing really great things, so please be sure to check them out. And thank you so much, Pete, for providing us great content. You are such an expert in this. The recordings of this event will be available with the key takeaways on our site shortly. And don't forget to check out our other upcoming events as well as the summit. So stay safe, and we'll see you later.
And if folks want, I think there's like a little button right above on Goalcast above my head, somewhere up here.
Yes.
If folks are interested in getting started on their data-driven sales management journey, it's very easy to sign up for an Atrium account. It takes about 90 seconds. You can just bop over there and get jamming on that. But otherwise, really great to see everybody, and have a great rest of your week.